So tell us a little bit about yourself, Beth. We read your profile online. You're an author and you have a lot of experiences in the paranormal. Could you take us through your journey?
Yeah, well, I've ever since I was a little kid, I've loved spooky stories and loved reading them and watching them. And I started writing them when I was a kid. I used to make up my own little books that I would illustrate about, haunted houses and haunted castles and so on. So it's something I've always enjoyed ever since I was a little kid. And in terms of writing, I wrote since I was rather young, and I kept at it. And of course, as coming up in the world as an adult, like I had, education, work. There were times, I couldn't devote, there were times that I was more focused on that. But then as time went on, I just kept working on my writing, and I wrote a couple novels that really, I treated them as learning experiences. Like I was hoping to get them published, but I really thought they weren't ready to go. And but I just kept getting feedback on my writing, and then finally, I looked to getting things published, and I started to get books out on the world. And actually, my books to begin with are rather, I'd probably categorize them more as like literary fiction would be how I would describe them. And but then I've always wanted to write, I've always loved spooky stories, so I wanted to write one. And then finally, the book that I had come out in 2024, The Inhabitants, was my first launch into writing kind of what I think you could call it a ghost story. It's sort of in the realm of gothic horror, is how I would describe it. A little more like psychological horror is how I would describe it. So that was my first entree into that, and it was really interesting. I mean, I think one of the things, maybe I delayed it so long because I was worried that I wouldn't live up to the ideas of the books and stories that I like so much, but I really enjoyed the process. So
Yeah.
that was kind of, The Inhabitants was kind of my first spooky book, I guess you could say, is written as an adult.
You're a
But
little perfectionist until you got it out there. So now, what year did you say the Inhabitants? You wrote the Inhabitants?
yeah, so that was 2024. So, but I have
Mhm.
another book coming out in 2027 that's it's in the realm of the supernatural too, but it's maybe a little bit more magical realism. But I really, I really enjoy the kind of the ghostly, spooky genre. So I hope to keep coming back to it for sure. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, Beth, you did suffer a brain injury in 2009. Was that what? So that didn't have anything to do with what got you writing about these sort of stories, or
yeah, wasn't related exactly, but it did affect my writing in that it was kind of it wasn't I fainted in a supermarket, and I'd never fainted in my life, and I fractured my skull on the floor of the supermarket, and
um,
so it was rather unexpected, and it was kind of for a bit I was having trouble like reading or writing, and it took a lot of rehabilitation and so forth. And I'd had a book at that time. I had a book that I was close to hoping to get out in the world, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever, be able to return to it. But eventually, really just with time and healing, and honestly, just a lot of sleep, and rehabilitation, I was able to go back to work on it. So that was really, I feel very, very, very fortunate that I was able to
definitely.
stage a
And so,
recovery.
just an accidental slip in the supermarket, and you suffered. Like, was it quite a severe injury though? Like for you to have been going through therapy and everything?
Yeah, yeah, like, I had a skull fracture, and then I had some bleeding in the brain and that sort of thing, so it was kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was kind of, it wasn't a dramatic, car accident or anything like that. It was just a
Um,
kind of like a feigning and falling. So yeah, kind of a freak accident, but I was very, very fortunate. I mean, I had such supportive husband and friends and family, and
yeah.
it was just, thanks to all of them, and I was able to kind of just get through it very
Yeah.
fortunately.
Amazing. And so looking back now, do you see that experience as a turning point or something else entirely?
Yeah, I think it really taught me something. I mean, I think it was something that was true of me all along, and that I think I have a real stubborn streak in me, and that's not to say that you can, just being stubborn will help you recover from, that's not the whole thing. But I feel like I just really felt like, I kind of have this drive. I think with writing too, like I feel like we all have. with my writing, I feel like, you deal with rejection and frustration stuff. And I feel like, I just feel like I just really tried to persist. And I feel like I learned that I have, that I really definitely have a persistent streak in me. And, on top of that, of course, I had great medical treatment and support in a lot of other ways. But I feel like just that in terms of just kind of moving ahead, I really feel like that persistence and stubbornness that I've always had in me, it really taught me that, yes, that it's really important at the time. So definitely.
Amazing. Really strong resilience there as well.
Yeah, I hope, and I think, we're just, and again, thanks to, also all the support that I had medically and personally and everything else was just so valuable too. So I was very lucky.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did that injury in any way change your perception of reality? Did you get a different insight into what we call the real world, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It's kind of related to that. Retrospectively, I ended up writing an essay about this that was published in like a medical journal about looking back on it. My mother suffered a dementia, and at that time, it was like probably, probably around the time of my accident, she was probably looking back, she was probably starting to have a little bit of mild cognitive impairment. And I just remember looking back over time and thinking about, like definitely when you have a brain injury, one of the things that it makes you susceptible to, dementia could be one of those things that you're more susceptible to. So I was kind of looking back at my mother's time with dementia, and then the brain, and just how, how we have these vulnerabilities, and it just made me think about her and what she was going through, I hope with more compassion. And that there were some changes that my father had been noticing for years. And he said, your mother isn't the same in these different ways. And I said, Dad, I don't think it's that bad as you think it is. And I think retrospect, my dad saw so much more of that than I ever did, being with her from day to day. And it gave me a lot more sympathy for my father and also for my mom, because I do think there were gradually things that she was, looking back, I think he was right about, things where maybe we would be watching a movie and she would have a little bit more trouble following it, or she was a little bit more silent in conversation than she was. So I guess that all that is to say is that I think that the experience with my brain injury sort of gave me a new perspective on what was going on with my mother's brain. And, and also what that meant for my father, because, it really, definitely he was, I think he was, ultimately it was heartbroken by what was going on with her, so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'd like to take a deeper dive into the paranormal side of the story. Have you had paranormal experiences as a young girl? Did you see ghosts, or did you have family friends that did? And could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a kid, I was like, oh, I would love to have seen a ghost, and I always thought like, I would love it, but it really didn't come until later. I mean, there was something kind of weird. I had a couple weird things happen, and that when I was shortly after college, when I had my first real job, and I got a job on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which is right on the ocean. I got this beautiful kind of attached apartment to a house, and it was by the shore. It was lovely, and you could hear the ocean at night. I loved it, but so I went off to work one day, and when I came back, there were these casement windows upstairs that are really securely locked. They just can't blow open in the wind. You have to give the latch a good twist. And then there's those rubber seals where it really, they're closed, and they were wide open. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. And my landlord would always let me know if there was if they were going to come and go from the house, they would always tell me. And as a matter of fact, when I saw my landlord, he said, do you mind keeping the windows closed because of the rain? And I was too embarrassed to say anything to him, because he's going to think I'm losing it if I tell him the windows are, coming open. And on top of that, the thermostat was turned all the way up to the max. And this was in May or something. It was just really weird. So I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to write it off. And then a couple of weeks later, it happened again. And it was just weird. So I don't know what was going on. And I talked to a woman at my job who, she was very like into the supernatural. And she goes, I can do like a ritual or burn some sage and like try to move this thing along. And I was I was pretty skeptical. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. And then that, that didn't happen again for whatever reason. And then when I was writing The Inhabitants, I thought, I was thinking, the thing that happened to me on the Cape in that house felt rather impersonal in a way. I mean, it felt like I was pranked, but it didn't feel like anything personal toward me, like so anyone, any spirit or whatever connected to me was coming back or anything. So I thought, I've never visited a medium, so why don't I try that just to see what happens? And I went to one medium, and the way I've described it to some people, it was like I was like going to an open house where people were coming and going, but I didn't really know any of them. Like they were really nice, but like the medium would say, "Oh, there's this person," and she would describe them and and I'm like, that person doesn't really. I think she was getting a little impatient with me. Like I felt like she said something like, you really have to believe in it if it's good, or something like, I feel like you're not really into this, and maybe that's causing some barrier or whatever, but I just, whatever. So then I tried, I actually did more research, and I found research into mediums that have been more vetted about, in terms of their results and what, they seem to have more of a connection. I waited for like a long time. I think it was like 6 months that I was on a waiting list. And finally I connected with this other medium, and it was all I can say, it was really uncanny. I mean, like she, she described like my things of my mother, specific possessions that my mother had given me, and described them, and like, just experiences that, things that were going on in my family that no one would have known. It wasn't something that someone could look up on the internet, or things that about my parents that who were both dead by that time. Just really super, super, like it was almost like uncanny. So. And at that point, I thought, I've been fairly skeptical, but then, I guess I'll just say that I think I'm more open to the possibility now that it's possible that some part of our conscious mind could survive us when our physical bodies. I'm more open to that idea. And there's some places that are kind of looking into it. Like in the United States, the University of Virginia has the Division of Perceptual Studies, where they're doing some research into phenomena such as this. And one area I think they've looked at in quite a lot is, like, for instance, near-death experiences, where people have kind of other perceptions that they wouldn't otherwise have of their bodies and what's going on when they're seemingly clinically dead. But so I'm glad that there's some scientific looking into all this, but it's very mysterious. So who knows? I mean, I guess maybe I'll find out when I'm dead myself. I will see what happens, but
absolutely. And I think like some people definitely do want that scientific evidence to show that it's there, but we've all probably had that odd experience here or there where we go, well, I think something that we can't explain is definitely happening. And was that medium able to confirm to you what that was in your house and the shape?
That's a really good question. No, I did not ask about that because she was it's funny. I think we were focused on more like personal things to me, like personal relationship kind of stuff. But that's a really good question. I wonder what I wish I could have asked her that, because I wonder what she would have said about it. I mean, I kind of speculated, like my landlord had a daughter who died really, really young. I mean, she was probably in her early 30s, and she had lived in that apartment for a while. So, I mean, I just speculated. I was like, I wonder if that was partly like her or whatever, but again, it was like just pure speculation. So, but I wish I would have asked about that for sure.
Yeah, not too late
to go back.
I know, I guess I could, right? I could do, hey, how about that? Yeah. Do you remember me?
So talking about your experiences in the supernatural, what was your motivation? What was your inspiration for the book, for the novel?
Yeah, well, it's funny, like I've always loved, I love the idea of like a spooky houses, and and also stories where the setting is a character, and like maybe the most chilling character in the story is the setting. So I'm thinking about, just for instance, like one famous example is like Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, where you have that fantastic house that's like, you almost get a sense of, like, she talks about an opening passage of like the house is not sane, and it's holding darkness within. You almost get a sense that there's like a physical embodiment of the house, and that the whatever walked there walked alone. There's this sort of sense of animation and life to this house. And so for the Inhabitants, the setting was very important. And I think it was one of the things that came very early to me, was that I wanted the setting to be very important. And I actually had it, the idea that I had and that ended up being executed in the book was that the house was designed by a 19th century architect who believed that his creations could influence the mind. And he had the idea that it could influence the mind in beneficial ways. But, what happens is, it has random, you can't always affect how it's going to affect people. And the character who moves into the house, the protagonist of the novel, is a visual artist, a painter. And so she's very attuned to visual details, and she's very affected. And she starts to wonder, I'm having these weird experiences. Is it the house or is it me? And there's a little bit of both going on. And meanwhile, there's also this kind of charming next door neighbor who becomes involved in the story too. And he's got kind of an agenda too. So you have the charming, but yet kind of questionable next door neighbor, the house. Then there's other stuff going on. And there's also, I've always loved stories where, as part of the house or the setting theme, where there's like characters who kind of lurk in the shadows. And one of them is being the housekeeper, who seems to know everything and who maybe knows a little more than she should. So there's a housekeeper too, who kind of comes with the house. She just kind of walks out of the shadows and say, here, I'm here to clean. And so we have that kind of setting, the character wrestling with the visual and physical details, and also this kind of mysterious shadowy figure who's has an agenda as well. So all those different parts.
So interesting. I'm so going to read this book.
Oh, you're so kind. Well, if you do, I hope you enjoy it.
No, it sounds really like the sort of books I would totally love, and I do enjoy the spiritual side. So before writing this book, you said you had an interest in the spooky, the haunted, and all of that. Were you brought up, or were you spiritual in any way, religious, or this must have come from somewhere? Was it just pure curiosity?
I think it was curiosity. It's funny, like, I think my parents are really good in that, like, they were like, oh, we should you should go to church and check it out and make sure. So we did. But I was just like, I always had this feeling in church, like, oh, I really want to listen and pay attention and try to absorb. And then my mind would always end up wandering around.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just kind of like, I really wanted to make it a good faith effort good faith, so to speak, to try to, but I never really got, I never really hooked into religion, but I was always like, I remember being like, whenever I went to the library, I'd always want to look up stuff on ghosts and witches and whatever, like all that stuff. I don't know what it says about me, but I think like there's just something that I think a lot of us are curious about what is mysterious and what we can't explain. And I think religion goes along with that too, right? That we kind of want to explore that. And so I think that it was more just like personal curiosity. And then I have to say books. Like, I love books so much. I always have. And I feel like it doesn't matter what age you are, it's great that, when I was a kid, I could just go and wander and pick out any story that I wanted. And, just like have that, like, it's just such a magical thing. And like, since I was interested in that, like, I remember reading about like, all of these famous ghost stories, like there was a lot of them that came out of like England and so forth. And I would love like any sort of spooky castle or whatever, and loved reading about it. So yeah, so it was kind of, books were a lot of a big deal for me in that regard. So
I was just going to quickly touch on inspiration. You mentioned books. I'm thinking haunted homes or other spooky locations to go and check out. Is that something that would interest you, to go and spend a night in an actual haunted house?
I think I would find it. It's funny. I've never done it, and I think I'm trying to think of some famous houses that we've, they're often featured on these shows, and I think I would. I think I'd want to have like a big fluffy teddy bear or a puppy or something be with me and whatever. Or, just like whatever, like one of the weighted blankets or something to comfort me. But yeah, I think I would be interested in that. I mean, it would be something to try. Maybe I'd have to have someone with me or something, but I would totally do it. I don't know. Have you folks ever done anything like that yourselves?
No,
We haven't.
I haven't done the haunted house thing, but I have definitely like been doing, I guess it's a version of the Ouija board, and I've seen mediums before, and I'm definitely interested in that side. Like I think what you're speaking of maybe would be like the occult or whatever. But I was brought up religious, but definitely have a spiritual side, and I agree that like I've read so many books on near-death experiences and things like that. I even wonder, because I also love books, and I do absolutely like agree with you when you say reading, you can do it at any age and everything. But I'm wondering, because your inspiration has come because you had an interest, and I'm feeling like, was it, inspired because, or channeled because something's been wanting to come out of you and come out on the page, and you're obviously a good writer, so it's been coming through. So, it could be that too.
Yeah, I had thought about that, but maybe there's something going on that I'm not even aware of in my conscious mind. You know what I mean? Like sometimes that happens. So maybe I am in some way kind of channeling that, or, you know, but yeah, I definitely fit. It's interesting too, because there's no one in, no one in my family who I feel like kind of the freak, because I'm like, there's no one. I think I'm like the spooky haunted house, ghost person that, so who knows where it comes from, right? That,
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that both of your parents have passed away now. Have you sensed or felt their presence at all?
it's funny, beyond that, the conversation with the medium, not so much, but I do have possessions of theirs that it's really nice, and I have recordings of their voices too, which is that's super nice. Like I love hearing those recordings, because I'm so glad, like I spent a little time before they died. I actually interviewed them to get more of their stories on audio, and that's been really great, because I feel like that there's something about the sound of someone's voice that's not like anything else. But in terms of actually having something like, ghostly happen, aside from the thing with that medium, no, not exactly, but I would welcome it if they're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so slight pivot away from the ghost part, but still to do with the writing. I'm curious, after the brain injury, did you feel writing came naturally? Was there a struggle for you to get back into it the way you obviously only published your first book after? So it's worked, but was that a process for you as well to have to?
Yeah, definitely. Like for a while, I mean, honestly, I was so focused on recovery that I didn't try. And honestly, I was a little afraid too. Like I thought, oh, I was having trouble reading, and then I got back where I was able to read. And then I thought, I'm just gonna, at some point, I think it was really fortunate that I'd already had a book that I was working on, because it's not like I was just starting from scratch. Like I had a project where I had some momentum. And so at some point I just opened up a computer file, and I spent time just rereading what I'd already written. And then that kind of like thought, oh yeah, here's where I need to go. So I was really fortunate that I had like kind of a little bit of a running start. And then at some point, there wasn't anything magical to it other than like my habit, where I try to just, sit down. What sometimes they say, put your rear end in the chair, and like that's the most important part, and show up for your work. And then, sometimes it's not going to work out and nothing is going to happen, but you have to be there. And then sometimes it'll just get going. So I just kind of got back into that habit that I'd had before the injury. And eventually things kind of got flowing, and I was so lucky. Like, I don't feel like, I mean, who knows, maybe I have a distorted perception of myself and my writing. I'm not, my writing or my ability to write changed, but I feel like somehow I really just was able to pick up on it and get back to it. So I think it was just kind of time, allowing my brain to heal, and then putting myself in that place, in front of my computer, and getting back into that story that just kind of allowed me to return to that phase of my life, which was great. So
Absolutely. And is your process of writing the same as before? Like, do you always do an outline or?
yeah, I think it's pretty much the same. I think, again, just kind of persistence and habit. I try not to be over like rigid with an outline, but I like to have a sense with novels. I feel like I like to have kind of a sense of how things are going. That being said, like once I get writing, I'm always surprised. Like sometimes a story will take, characters, or it takes on kind of a life of its own. And I love that. That's like my favorite part of writing, where I feel like, oh yeah, that you're just in a scene and something happens. You're like, that's totally like, that's the way things have to go. So it's kind of that trying to strike that balance between having a sense of where things are going, but then also allowing yourself to have an adventure and write. And so yeah, that was kind of my habit before, and it continued to be so. And so yeah, just kind of showing up for it. And yeah, so I think that it didn't really change, but just kind of just kind of the ability to kind of return to that habit was what
Yeah,
kept me
that's great.
going.
That's really great. And I've always been curious about this one thing because I do love to write, but not necessarily stories. I just journal a lot and things. And I've always wondered if you get these great ideas in your head, do you always have to have the ending? Do you have to know the ending before you sit down to write, or do you just write and let it take you where it will?
It's funny. I hardly ever know the ending of when I'm writing. Um, and I mean, it's interesting because a couple of my friends, they have the ending in their mind and they write toward it, which I think is
Mhm.
fantastic. However people want to do it, but I almost never, get the, pretty much never. I just don't know how things are going to end. I mean, I kind of have a rough idea maybe, but then like, I think like that's one of those things where I kind of have to see how the story goes. And then for the inhabitants in particular, I'll never forget there was a time where like the ending, I just remember having this feeling of like, oh, I was near the end of the book and I thought, okay, I think I know how this is going to go. And then this other ending just kind of popped to mind. And I thought, oh yes, I don't even think I was writing at the time. I think I was out running or doing errands. And I just thought, oh, that's the ending. And so it was a little bit of a surprise, but it came late in the writing process. And it was a surprise to me. But I felt like it kind of felt like it was right for the way the story was. So
That's so cool. Yeah.
And I'm just curious, we're talking about journeys and processes, and on a more personal note, Beth, what were some of the I guess beliefs that you had to let go of to become the person that you are today? Because obviously you haven't been a writer your whole entire life, and how did that come about?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think I've always been like, I mean, I always think of like myself as like super conscientious, like maybe to a default. Like, I mean, I feel like whatever job I've had, like I feel like I really need to give it my all and really put like so much into it. And I mean, I still believe that. I feel like that's really important. But then sometimes I feel like, fiction right now, I thought, oh, I want to write a book or I want to do this and that. And then I feel like I would let other things kind of get in the way. And then I was kind of like, hey, am I just avoiding this because I'm afraid I'm going to fail or whatever? So, or am I really just spending so much time on other things? Like, I'm like, what are your priorities? Like, you really have to get that straight. And then, so I think with time, I mean, I think one thing that really helped was like I was able to scale back, like, thanks, my husband was working, I was able to go like to like freelance and do like have my like pare back on my job hours. So that really helped me like to reorganize my life. And so it allowed me more time to write. And so that was a huge thing. But I feel like a lot of it was kind of rethinking like, okay, what are your priorities? Life is, limited. So how do you sort things so you can get things done that are really important to you, right? And I'm so glad I did because it's just not that I wasn't writing at all, but it was just like it allowed me to like really focus on and get that stuff done to a degree that I hadn't been able to do before. So
I love that because that's a common thread that we hear all the time. We tend to live one way, and then there's some calling inside of us. There's some kind of a purpose that we really kind of feel like we need to do on a deeper level, and it's taking that leap, I guess, from a safe space into that space of passion, of journey, of purpose. And as you've mentioned, your transition there was quite unique in that you were able to have the support and you were able to sort of transition a little bit more gradually. But any regrets? Do you wish you would have done anything differently in that process?
yeah, I mean, sometimes I think, oh, maybe I wish I would have started like earlier, but then I feel like, well, you know what? You can't look back and think about, I mean, I just feel like I'm so grateful for the time that I've had now. I've been able to do it. And, I feel like I don't have any regrets in that regard at all. So I'm just really, and I feel like in terms of, all the stuff that I was spending time on, I mean, I'm really glad I had a great, when I was really, working long hours. I feel like I was really lucky to have a career that I enjoyed. And I met a lot of wonderful people through that are still really dear. I actually met my husband through my work. So, I mean, they're not to, I don't, not to like, denigrate that at all. I mean, I think there were a lot of great things that came out of that part of my life as well. So I can't complain. And I'm so lucky to be able to do what I'm doing now. So
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had to equip yourself with all the other tools that probably assist you in your writing as well. And how amazing that what might have started off as a bit of a hobby has turned into you getting
Publishing.
published. Yeah, that's a real accomplishment. Did you have to like do a lot of research on how to go about the process of doing that, getting published and all of
yeah,
that?
definitely. Yeah. But fortunately, like just now, there's so much information available online. But then I'm also part of like a great writing community. Like I was in a writers group for a long time, and we're still, friends and stay in touch. And like where I live in Boston, Massachusetts, there's a really great writing community, and people are really supportive. And that you can always talk to people like, how did you go about doing this or that, um, so that's been really helpful. And it took a lot of research and just persistence. I mean, rejection is just part of the game with getting published. Like you have to really develop a thick skin and kind of, if you get feedback, I try to always get feedback from fellow writers before I ever send anything out in the world. But then once you started getting rejections, like, very rarely these days. I mean, I think maybe in previous times, publishers would be more willing to say, here's why we didn't accept this. And if you got such feedback, you could incorporate it and think, oh, these are some changes I can make. Now it's more like a form rejection. Thanks, this isn't for us. But you have to just kind of say, okay, so what's next? I mean, do I need to revise this before I send it out again? Or do I just need to find different publishers? So that's kind of the other part of it, is just kind of like, learn, like rejection is part of it. And you just have to kind of build that into your reality check when you're going ahead with stuff.
Develop a thick skin. And it is really important, I think, what you said, if the publishers can give you that feedback and sort of say, this is what you're missing, or if it's just that they're not interested in that genre. Like, it's important for you to know for your own work, isn't it? I do wonder though, like, do you believe that where you are today, was that what you'd seen and set out for yourself all those years ago? Had you always seen yourself as a published author? Did that come naturally?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had like I made all these failed attempts to keep diaries when I was a little girl, but one diary that I started was I mean, I don't know, if I had to guess how old I was probably like 7 or 8, and I said, when I grow up, I want to either be a writer or an artist. So, or I mean, like a visual artist. So I did do like some drawing and painting and stuff. I never got to be that good at it, but I always thought, yeah, it was definitely with me from that young age. And so I think that, hopefully the younger me would have been happy that I was able to, publish the books. And I think, it definitely was a long-term dream of mine. So I'm definitely really happy that I was able to realize that and hopefully keep at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of keeping at it and the journey, what's next now that you've published and you've got another novel coming out? Looking forward to the next 5-10 years, what are you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because like I have, a book coming out in 2027, and now I'm kind of like I'm in like a little like kind of in like a downtime. Like I started one novel that I thought, oh, this has some legs to it, and then I put it aside and I thought, maybe that's not for me. And I started another one. So now I'm kind of just kind of like reading and exploring and seeing. I mean, I definitely feel like I will write another, I don't feel like I'm done writing books by any stretch of the means, but I think sometimes I found this to be the case in the past too. Like sometimes I think my brain and my creative process needs a little bit of a fallow period just to kind of regroup and read. I'm doing a lot of reading. So I think that, and still writing down ideas for stories, but I think it's just kind of, I'm kind of in that period right now. But, and I think too, like, I think I definitely I see myself writing, in the spooky genre for sure, but I also, in the terms of, when I said earlier that I write literary fiction, I think that what I mean by that, like sometimes when people say literary fiction, it's like whatever is in a genre, then it's literary fiction. But I see it as more like sort of the stories that delve more into characters' interior lives and struggles, and not to say there's no plot or anything, but that it's very character centered. So I think like whatever I do will be very much in that way too. So
Yeah.
looking forward.
Yeah, very interesting to me because you'd said you'd started a book and then you put it aside because you didn't feel like it had legs to it, and then you moved on to another one. In that moment, are you thinking, I'll come back to this, or are you thinking this isn't working, I'm just going to restart? Is it not all this hard work that you've then had to put aside?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like, I feel like in both cases, I feel like, hey, maybe there's something there that I would revisit. Like, I feel like, maybe I won't, but I always think like, and sometimes it's a little germ in something, like maybe something when, like, it won't be the ideas I envisioned it, but maybe some angle in one of those stories will resurface to take on a life of its own. So sometimes that process of just generating ideas, I think, even if it doesn't go the way you at first think, sometimes it takes your mind, just like the writing process itself, it takes you to places that you hadn't planned on going, but then you discover interesting bits that you want to explore more. So I
Absolutely.
definitely won't let go of those ideas for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say you can probably pop them into the new book, but it's also quite inspiring, I think, your process and even what you did. You've sort of gone, this isn't working, I'll move on to the next. And you've set this intention that you want to be a published author, but you got on with it with work. And I think that's inspiring for others to listen to as well, that whatever you start, even if it's coming from a creative place, it can go somewhere, it can land somewhere, it can be a published author, or just the fact that you're doing it probably is fulfilling as well, because it's coming from, within. So that's really amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel that, it's really like any creative process that I feel like it doesn't matter what it is, painting, drawing, and even like I even think like athletic, I think there's an element of creativity to those sorts of things too, that I feel like there's something wonderful that it's kind of a way of creative expression in any way. I mean, it's funny, I have a greyhound who she zips around, and I think like it's pure joy and self-expression when she's running. Like, and I feel like it's wonderful that we have that capacity in all of us to have, and to any extent that we can let it go and enjoy it and learn about ourselves and the world through it is just a wonderful thing. So
Absolutely. That's kind of what we're doing with this project of ours, and also just any other personal projects. It's just, creative expression and just doing things that make you happy. I think that's amazing. Tell us a little bit about your next book coming out.
yeah, so it's basically, so just to give a little background, my mother grew up on a small farm in Western Pennsylvania in the United States, and that farm is still in our family. Like, my cousins run it, and my cousins and I consider it sacred ground. Like, when we were growing up, we would always, converge upon the farm, and it's just like totally let ourselves run wild, and we just had such a wonderful time. And so that farm has always been a setting in my mind. And so I thought I wanted to set a novel on that land. So I had this idea for like a fourth generation farmer who's like the last person to keep her farm going, and she's facing all kinds of pressure. There's a developer who's breathing down her neck to get her to sell the land, and she really would be better off maybe selling because she's financially struggling, but she's just doing everything that she can to hold on to it. And kind of in the background is that there's kind of a family legend or a local legend that her great grandmother basically poisoned her husband to keep him selling the land out from under her. And so she feels like this thing, hey, my great grandmother supposedly killed to hold on to this land. So anyhow, while she's holding on, trying to keep things running, she puts out a call for help, and this drifter comes into town who has this uncanny ability to help her, keep the crop. But this person kind of is actually an element of her personal history has come back to kind of life, and has kind of an agenda of her own, and has some, it's kind of like that's where the kind of magical realism comes into play. So it's a little bit of a, kind of a story about struggling to hold on to something that you love, but also dealing with some of the otherworldly and unexpected things that could go on with that. So
amazing. Sounds
fascinating.
Is it complete? Is it finished, or are you still working on it?
It's finished, but it's actually going into editing now with the publisher. So I think actually probably any time now, very soon, I'll probably be getting edits on it. So I'll have to, probably do some revising and so forth. But the plan is for it to come out in October of 2027. So October of next year. So
why does it take so long if you've already finished it and it's just editing? Is that editing process really long as well, or?
Yeah, and usually the like publishing pipeline usually takes a long time, just for
Mhm.
editing, but also kind of getting that, publishers with their pipeline, getting everything printed and produced, and then all of the, the stages of like copy editing, proofreading, getting the book designed, getting the cover designed, and then there's the whole marketing thing, like making sure that things are up and running, and getting ready to distribute things to bookstores and market it. So it's kind of like it's it's kind of a longer pipeline than it seems from, what you would
Yeah.
think.
Do
But
you have a book title yet?
yeah, it's the time of reaping is what it's called, and that's actually a line from
Okay.
from a hymn, from a church hymn. So
Yeah.
that becomes involved in the cover. I don't have a cover yet, but the publisher has lovely designs, so I'm looking forward to seeing the cover,
So
whatever it
you
might
get to
be.
be involved in the whole process, the book cover, everything?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like with the cover, the authors fill out these very detailed questionnaires about the theme and then the characters and everything. And we don't actually we can't approve, like we can say, oh, I don't want that cover, but we do get a lot of input on what the, what the cover, like ideas for the cover, basically. So,
Right.
so it's
Wow.
exciting.
Nice.
And these publishers, sorry,
Yeah.
I
Go
was
on.
gonna say, did they do they like fund you for the next project, or do you kind of just go, I've got a new story and go with it every time?
It depends. Sometimes people get like a multi-book deal with a publisher where a lot of times it's series books. Like you get signed up for 3 books in a series and you get a contract. But for me, it's just a one-off book, so
Yeah.
one-off thing. So this will be my second book with this publisher. And I've loved working with them, but I don't have like a contract for like, a future book with them. So whatever book I write, I'll just have to see if there are takers on it at that point. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on overcoming obstacles. We've managed to talk about inspiration and a few other, obviously, obstacles in life and profession. And for any upcoming authors listening, what are some words that you could share with them to help them overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think that's so important for me is community. Like, it's so important if you can. I mean, writing is such a solitary endeavor in many ways. Although, I want feedback on my work from other writers, but I feel like just building a community of like, I think if you're dealing with rejection or, you just feel, or you're feeling lost with your story, like, oh, I'm working on this thing, I don't know where it's going. Like being able to talk to other writers and and have that support is just really important. I'm lucky to have a really strong community, so I think if you can like find your community and for the moral support and also the practical support, if you want to get input on your writing or advice or anything like that. So I think that would be one thing that I think is really, really important. And then I also just think of reading, like I always return to that. Like sometimes I just like, I'll, if I feel like I'm at lot, like I don't feel inspired or whatever, I feel like there's no end to like the really wonderful books that are coming out all the time. And I just feel like I get inspired when I read a book that I just really enjoy. And it makes me think about, not just the enjoyment of the story, but like how the writer put that work of art together. Like I'm inspired by learning how other artists do that. So those are just 2 things, but I think they're really important to me personally. So
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to reading your books. I think, yeah, for sure. They sound so interesting and definitely the sort of genre I'm interested in as
oh, thank
well.
you.
Yeah. And are you going to stay in this genre, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it. I think like it's funny though. I've also said this. Every book that I've written is quite different. So but I definitely feel like the spooky and supernatural genre. I definitely feel like something I want to keep up with. But I actually wrote like I've written I wrote a kind of a literary suspense novel. So there was an element. It was like
Oh, nice.
a road novel. A road novel that had like a crime element in it. So that
Yeah.
was fun. That was really fun to write too. So, because partly for me is keeping myself entertained. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so,
element of magic and mystery. Definitely.
yeah, definitely a little bit of yeah. That one is more grounded in the real world. Like
Yeah.
there was no supernatural element, but definitely some kind of mobsters floating around.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you, Beth, for sharing your story. We will definitely pick up a copy of your novel, The Inhabitants. Please share it with us. We want to link it into the comments below for our audience, and we will keep an eye out for the new novel coming out in 2027.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for spending time interviewing me. I've really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate your thoughtful questions and everything. So.
Yeah.
1, 2,